Our community where the Civil War people gathered to go off to war and things like that. And as Donna mentioned a while ago to me, the North Community North, Vernon North, they would get together in the Mount Pisgah area of the county, and I still have a quilt in my possession that was given to me and passed down to me, where all the ladies got together with quilting and they would embroider their names in the quilt, and it was called a friendship quilt. But I want to talk about some things, and I'll try to break them up into categories tonight. First of all, communication. I remember at Mother Boman's house, on the wall next to the fireplace, there was an old crank telephone, and I think her number, if I remember correctly, was 3 longs and a short. Now that means you crank it long 3 times and you go like that just for a little bit. And she would be calling somebody else that had like 2 shorts and a long. But if anybody picked up, I've heard my grandmother say, Francis, was that you that picked up? You could hear it when it clicked, you know. That was one of the ways they had of communicating. And it was called a party line in those days. And I remember the bells. Now, for some reason, I remember the church bells and all that. But I remember the farms around, like the Grahams out near Fellowship. They had a bell on a pole there. And they used that bell to call the men in from the fields for dinner time and things like that. And when I was just a little kid, I was out there. And my Aunt Dot took me out to the Graham's house. And they were older. And they were inside, and I got that bell, and I just started ringing the fool out of that thing. And the next thing I knew, a bunch of cars came driving up into the driveway, and I thought, what in the world? Aunt Dot nearly whipped me. She said, you don't do that. That is an emergency signal. That's all we know. It might have been a fire for all these people knew, and I didn't know that that's what it was for in those days. Excuse me. I want to talk about churches and baptizings. My great uncle John Bickerstaff, he, as we said a while ago, he had a vocabulary. I didn't want to learn that vocabulary because you didn't want to hear it, quite frankly. But he had a saying about some woman that he knew, and he said, well, if it's true that the Church of Christ believed that water baptism washes away sins, I know a woman that needs to be dunked about 3 times. So I don't know who it was. It might have been one of you. I don't know, but I hope not. Anyway, I remember the baptizings that took place in Bailey Boman Creek. Bailey Boman Creek is over there where Bailey Boman used to live, and I think the road is called Boman Road now. I'm not sure about that. But anyway, it's down from Mount Pisgah. And on Sunday mornings when they were going to have a baptizing, or that afternoon, Lester Crowder and some of the other men from the community would go over to Bailey Boman Creek, and they went over there so that they could shoot the snakes before the baptizing. And I think that was a wonderful idea, because I don't know anybody that wanted to be baptized with snakes around, but that was a thing that they did back in those days. I spoke at the Emmaus Decoration Day for over 30 years, and it usually comes 4th Sunday in May, and the crowds have been getting a little smaller as people pass away and so forth. But I was not going to be able to speak a few years back, and I asked Brother Benton Goodman, I said, Benton, could you go there and speak for me? And there used to be a great big oak tree. They had to cut it down because it got rotten, but it was a great big oak tree. And I mean, it was that big around. You couldn't put your arms around it. And he would get out there under that shade of that oak tree, and he would speak, and that's where I always spoke from. And in the middle of his sermon, and the ladies sitting there in those old rusted metal chairs they put out every year, a snake fell out of the tree. And I accused Benton of having a snake handling service right there in Lamar County. But I think it disrupted the service. It seemed to anyway. Let's see. Church discipline. Now, I don't know if y'all ever knew Miss Jenny Butler. Miss Jenny Butler was a fine little lady, And I thought the world of her, and for a while she worked at the Board of Education out here. And Miss Jenny, bless her heart, she would just go around, be her humble self, and you'd think, this person is a saint. And I went through some church minutes that had been recorded back around 1910 or so, and it involved church discipline. Now, we don't have much church discipline anymore. People don't dress up, go to church anymore, and some of the people ought to be wearing clothes that look like they were decent. But anyway, I won't get into that. But there she was, right there in the minutes. She had been dismissed from Fellowship Baptist Church because she had gone dancing. And that was, back in those days, that was bad. Another guy had been dismissed from the church because he'd gone to a Russellite meeting. Now that's Russellite, Charles Taz Russell, Jehovah's Witnesses. So he was dismissed from the church. And a deacon, of all people there in the church, had been dismissed for using unkind words to his mule while he plowed in the field. But we're talking about kinfolks now. So my Papa Woods, my mother's daddy, he and another man had been dismissed from the church at Fellowship for being, and I quote, out of the way with whiskey. Now, I'll leave it to you on that. Church discipline. Let's see. What am I going to talk about now? Oh, yes. Most of the socializing that took place in those days was done at church. And people would get together and they would share all kind of stories and things. And I remember my grandmother Boman was a very plain-spoken woman. She didn't put flowers, so to speak, on her words and all. She just told it like it was. And Alma Boman had come to church one Sunday with a nice, beautiful dress, had flowers all over it. And she said to my grandmother, Alma did, she said, Fanny, what do you think of my dress? And Mother Boman said, oh, I think it looks nice, but it sure does make you look bigger. and I remember when I brought Carol, after I was engaged to my wife Carol, I brought her to meet the family over here in Vernon. And we went to Daddy Boman, Mother Boman's house, and Mother Boman wanted to see the engagement ring. And so Carol put it out there and showed it to her. And she said, look how they built up around it to try to make the diamond look bigger. So I was pretty cheap, you understand. I was in college and didn't have much money, and that thing cost me $600. It took me a long time to save that much. But anyway, let's see. Another thing about Mount Pisgah Church, back many, many years ago, probably in the early 30s or so, a tornado came through, killed a lot of people over in Mississippi. And J.T. Todd and my dad, James Boman, were the last two people that were still alive a few years ago that had been in the schoolhouse at Mount Pisgah. It was also the church house, when it got lifted off its foundation and set back down due to that tornado coming through. And Daddy remembered that till the day he died. Let's see, another thing, schools. Schools in Lamar County. Oh my goodness, in this area alone. You have, of course, Vernon School, but you had Emmaus School at one time. You had Union School. You had Shiloh, which was a very large school at that time. There was a pharmacy and a store there, and there was even a boarding house there that they're gone now, but Glenn and Gladys Woods had the house where the students would stay, and they would stay there. The young men would stay upstairs and had an outside stairway to get up to the outside rooms, and the girls would stay down with the ladies and gentlemen down on the bottom. And that house is still standing just down the road from Shiloh Baptist Church. You can go by there. It's a beautiful old home, and I did a wedding out there a few years ago. But it's a beautiful place if you want to go there and look. let's see what else. Oh,
Wasn't there a school at Oak Hill too?
what's that?
Oak Hill, wasn't there a school at Oak Hill?
There was a school at Oak Hill, and when I was a little bitty kid, I remember bobbing apples. And I remember trying to get that apple up, and I kept going down in the water and went down in the water, and the girl across from me had stuff running down out of her nose. And I decided I'd just pick the apple up. But I remember that. Oh, yeah, I remember the cakewalks and everything at Oak Hill. It's no longer there, but it right down, you can see it from Oak Hill Methodist Church. It's right down there.
They moved that building, and it's at
Crossville School was out there until just, 20, 25 years ago. Yeah, it was. My granddaddy was a school teacher, I think, at Union School, Grady Monroe Boman. And he was not allowed to join the military for World War I because he had flat feet. So they wouldn't let him join the military. So he decided he'd become a school teacher. And he sent off to Montgomery to the Department of Education for his teaching license. After all, he had gone through the 8th grade. And they sent back a thing, you have to take a test. Now it's called a praxis. If you ever hear somebody talk about a praxis test, you have to take that test to prove you're good in the subject matter or whatever. But in those days, they would just send you a questionnaire. And the questionnaire was this: tell us all you know about eclectic teaching. Well, he thought it said electric teaching. So he wrote about, you can have electric light bulbs for light, you can have electric fans for coolness, and I don't know what else in those days you could have with electricity. But he sent it in, and sure enough, they sent back a teaching license for my granddaddy Boman. They didn't know what eclectic teaching was either down there. Some of them still don't, but I won't get into that. Anyway, bless his heart, he was teaching school one day, and Cousin Lindsey Crowder, who was kind of a roustabout, he loved horses and guns. Cousin Lindsey came to school to learn ciphering. Now the word ciphering means math, mathematics, arithmetic. He wanted to come learn ciphering. He was 21 years old, a couple of years older than Granddaddy Boman, who was a teacher. Well, he came in there, tied the horse up, came walking in. Grady, I'm here to learn ciphering. Granddaddy Boman said, well, you'll have to hang your gun belt on the nail back there at the back of the room. And he said, nobody is going to tell me to take my gun off. So Daddy Boman just went over where they kept the wood pile for the stove, picked up a piece of stove wood, and knocked him out cold. Right there on the floor. Not like today's discipline, where we send them to timeout. Anyway, when he came to, he said, now you can come back, Lindsey, if you want to, but you're not going to come in here wearing your gun belt. And he never came back to learn ciphering. I don't know what happened to him, but bless him, he was one of our kinfolks. We're kin, if you go back far enough, Mike, I'm sorry, we're kin to the Hankins some way. I don't know how, but it's on the good side, whatever it is. My grandmothers used to tell me, and my granddad used to tell me how we were kin to Rube Burra, you know, the famous outlaw. I think all of us in here might be kin some way. His tombstone is out there at Fellowship Baptist Church, and I remember when I went down for John and Wilma Boman when they were getting married. We went to a man's house in Linden, Alabama, Mr. Carter. And Mr. Carter said, I want to come here, I want to show you something. And I said, okay, what is it? Well, he pulled out an old bullet. It was kind of marred a little bit, a bullet. And I said, well, that's a bullet. He said, yes, you know where that came from? And I said, no. He said, that came from Rube Burra's gun. And I said, well, tell me about it. My wife always says, I find out if we're kin to somebody and tell me about it, where you from and all this, you know. I think it's called 6 degrees of separation, something like that. We'll find out. Well, he said that Rube Burra was in the jail, and he told the jailer, I have some ginger snaps in the saddlebags over there, and if you will give me the saddlebags, I'll share the ginger snaps with you. But there was a pistol hidden in there. And he got the pistol out, held the jailer until he could open the jail. And then he hired 2 black fellas, or told them, he didn't hire them, he told them, now you go to tell Mr. Carter that there's somebody out here wants to see him. And so they went to Mr. Carter's house and knocked on the door. And Mr. Carter could tell something was not right. And he said, is there trouble brewing? And they said, yes, sir, there's trouble brewing. And so Mr. Carter took his hat and put it on, laid his overcoat over his arm, held his pistol under the overcoat, and went out there. And Rube Burra said, I'm here to kill you. Shot a hole through his hat, I saw the hat, and hit him, Mr. Carter, in the shoulder. But Mr. Carter was a better shot than he was. But anyway, I saw the bullet fired from Rube Burra's gun into Mr. Carter's father down in Linden, Alabama. Just wanted to share that with you. Let's see, what else do I want to talk about? I remember when I was principal at Vernon, the old ag building, I think this may be part of it, I'm not sure, but the old canning plant was right next door, where the ladies would come together at the end of harvest season, and they would can food for the lunches for the children. This is? Well, I don't recognize the groove in the floor where the juice ran out, but my first job teaching when Mary Lou at Vernon, when Mary Lou was in there in the 10th grade, that floor groove was still there. But anyway, somebody came running into the office and said, there's a fire in the ag building. And I thought, oh my gosh, there's a fire in the ag building, no telling how old that lumber is, and it'll just go up in flames. And Martha Brewer was trying to get her sewing machines out on the lawn, and it was just a mess, and everybody was hollering, all the kids looking out the window to see the school building burn and all that. And Jim Arnold, the band director at that time, and I went over there. We had grabbed a couple of fire extinguishers. And Jim and I said, now we'll pull these big old doors open where the fire is there in the ag shop, and we'll spray in there. And we pulled those doors open, and about that time, one of the tires on Mr. Weeks' old pickup truck that had caught on fire blew up. It went boom! And Jim Arnold and I decided we'd let the fire truck people go, and we backed out. But I remember some good times in those days, I really do. But then we got to looking around after they put the fire out. The building was not damaged, but the truck wasn't as fortunate. We found that they had insulated the top of the ag building with hay. Hay. Dried hay. Can you imagine what would happen if that had caught on fire? Well, we'd have had a conflagration like you've never seen before. I want to talk about medicine, especially coal oil. That's what my folks called it back in the day. It's kerosene today. I remember coal oil. One time when I was about 18 months old, Aunt Dot Woods, she put her coal oil in a jar on the back porch so she could get it and start the fire in her wood-burning stove. And I was just 18 years old. I saw it was liquid. I didn't know what it was. So I drank some of it. And my Aunt Dot found me passed out on the porch. And she scooped me up and ran a mile to Uncle Lee Wood's house. And my daddy and Papa Woods were planting corn. And they took me to Dr. Roberts We used to call him Old Dr. Roberts, and he was right over there where the Democrat office is, or near there, and he was upstairs. And Daddy said, Dr. Roberts said, what happened? Daddy said he drank kerosene. So Dr. Roberts, I don't remember this part, he went over there and attached the hose to the spigot, stuck it down my throat and turned the water on, and all that stuff came back up all over my daddy. I told everybody since then I have a flaming personality. But anyway, my grandmother, bless her sweet heart, she had her own cough medicine. One time when I was a little boy, I was searching around, as boys do, under the sink in the kitchen, and I saw a half-empty bottle of Wild Turkey whiskey. And I was so shocked because of my sweet grandmother. And I finally found out that she would make her own cough medicine, whether she had a cough or not. and she would mix it with honey and sometimes lemon juice. And they were the kind of old hard candy called whorehound drops. Now you don't hear that much anymore. But she would mix all that together and she would stifle her cough. Now let's see. I remember a story about Dr. Roberts. He would also go out to different places and deliver babies, in those days. Well, Dr. Roberts was out to deliver a baby in a lady's house somewhere here in the county. And the other lady that was attending, she'd say, Dr. Roberts, is it time to snuff her yet? And he'd look at her. He didn't know what she was talking about. Is it time to snuff her? He said, no, I'll tell you when that time comes. And he didn't know what to say. And finally, the baby was about to come. And Dr. Roberts looked, and the woman said, I can tell. It's time to snuff her. So she got some snuff and put it in the snuff lid and went to the lady's face and went, blew the snuff in her face, and Dr. Roberts caught the baby before it hit the wall. Anyway. Oh, there were all kind of vocations. And I remember looking at the old school records when I was working at the Board of Education. And they had some old records they were going to throw away. And I said, well, these are from the late 1930s, early 40s. And I began to look in there at the names. I still recognize names in our community here around Vernon. And every one of the boys, with one or two exceptions, listed as their future occupation farming. And all the girls listed homemakers, except one or two who wanted to be secretaries. And that was it. There were no other options listed there. Of course, my granddaddy went on to become, he got into politics and was commissioner a couple of times and tax assessor for a couple of times and so forth. I'll tell you about Mary Todd. I forgot to tell you about under the religion part. Sometimes the churches would get together and they'd have prayer meetings for specific people that were sick or specific situations. And it was about this time or earlier in the year, and the crops were all drying up and dying because it hadn't rained. There was no rain. And so they said, let's meet at Mount Pisgah. All the people from the community, even the heathen, came, and they were going to have a prayer service for rain. And everybody got up, the preacher got up, they prayed for rain, and they prayed for rain, and finally, is there anybody else wants to pray for rain? A little lady stood up. Her name was Mary Todd. And Mary Todd prayed and prayed for rain. And before she got through, there was a big dark cloud forming over in the west. And by the time she got through praying for rain, it came a downpour. My daddy was there. Bob Sanders was there. Matthews was there. Anyway, they were all at this prayer meeting, and the rain, just torrential rain. They couldn't even leave. Couldn't get out of the church. But you know what? my granddaddy complained he had 5 of these old wooden bridges that washed out. He was commissioner. He had to replace them all. Bailey and Alma Boman couldn't even get to their house because the bridge had washed out and had to go up around by where Gray Gilmer used to live to get home that way. But do you know, out of all of that, the only person that carried an umbrella to that service was Mary Todd? If you're going to pray for rain, at least go prepared, you know. Okay, let's see. I remember, too, as a boy, in fact, Carol, my wife's Grandmother Pritchett, sweet little lady, she still called the refrigerators the ice box. Go to the ice box and get me something. I've actually seen ice boxes when I was a little boy. Not only that, but I saw the ice man when he came around and he had big chunks of ice like that, and he put those old ice tongs in there about once a week or so, and they put them in those ice boxes, and that ice would slowly melt, but it'd keep everything cool. Now, my Aunt Dot had her own method. She didn't have an ice box, and they didn't have a refrigerator for a long time at their house. They kept the things they wanted cooled down in the well. They put them down in the well, and that's where if I wanted some milk, I had to go out there and take that windlass and do like that and get the milk to come up, and it'd be in a bucket down there at the bottom of the well. My mother whipped me one time because I was playing with the windlass at our house out here near Mount Pisgah when my dad got back from World War II. And I was playing with that windlass, and I'd pull that bucket up there full of water, then I'd let go of that windlass, and it'll splash. And my mother caught me doing that, and she beat me to half from here to China nearly. Anyway, she said, "That will kill you. That thing can come around and kill you." And I smarted off to her. She whipped me again because I said, "Well, you just nearly did." And oh my goodness, we didn't have indoor plumbing when I was growing up as a little bitty boy. Our plumbing was up yonder on the side of the hill, and we always kept the big Sears Roebuck catalog there. And while you were there doing your business, you could look at all things you wanted to in the catalog, what you might want to order next year. And the Christmas catalog was my favorite because it had toys in it. But anyway, that's another story, I guess. What about the way of travel? Railroads. The last time I rode on a railroad car was from Winfield to Sulligent many years ago when I was just a child and my sister wanted to ride with me. And so we rode from Winfield to Sulligent on the train. Daddy drove from Winfield to Sulligent to pick us up. But we had that experience. My Aunt Mittie Gann from up around Detroit, she was Papa Wood's oldest child. She went to Jacksonville State Normal School. Now, she went there to get her teaching certificate. Later on, it was called Jacksonville State Teachers College. Then Jacksonville State College. And while I was there, in my honor, they named it Jacksonville State University. At least I thought it was my honor. I don't know. But they called it that. So I'm a Jack State Gamecock, so to speak. But anyway, that's just the way they travel. I remember my great-granddaddy, Bud Boman, he got him a Model T car. And he tried to drive it with all the levers and everything, and he ran it into a ditch. And he got so mad at it that he just, next Sunday, he wanted to go to church. He just hooked his mules up to the front bumper and pulled it all the way to the church building because he couldn't drive it. But anyway, I never remember anything about him much, except I do remember that when I turned the milk over, great-grandmother Boman let the cat in to lick it up off the wooden floor. You know, we don't do that anymore. I remember Minnie Finch, great-aunt Minnie Finch, she would put sand on the floor, and you had to walk around on it like that, and you do like that into the floor, then you'd sweep the sand out. And I remember yard brooms made out of brush. You get out there, you didn't want any grass in your yard, for goodness sake. You had it just as clean as a whistle. And of course it was muddy when it rained. How about that? When it rained. Anyway, let's see. My dad, he didn't have a car when he was in college down at Auburn, so he had to hitchhike home. And he would catch rides, some to Montgomery, from Montgomery to Centerville, from Centerville somewhere else. And it would take him all day and half the night to get back to Vernon. And that's how you made it in those days. The first school bus, by the way, came out by Donna Sue's house out there where my great aunt lived until she was 106. And the first school bus that we had in this county was a flatbed truck. And the kids would get on the flatbed truck, hang their legs off, and that thing would just go like this all the way to the school, and everybody made it safely. And you wouldn't even see that kind of thing today. They don't want you riding kids around in the back end of your pickup truck, you know, today. Let's see what I've not said. Oh, the family mule, Old Bill. Daddy said Old Bill developed arthritis, and he was just, he couldn't plow anymore. And Daddy Boman said, James, you're going to have to take Old Bill and do away with him. Now, I don't really hope y'all are not members of People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, but so Daddy was able to get Old Bill, who just stood out there in the field, and he couldn't hardly move, but he finally got him over to the peach orchard where there was a dug well. And Daddy shot him right between the eyes, and Daddy said that Old Bill just went straight down like he was diving toward glory down there. And he just went straight down in that well. I know where that old well is. I don't want to, if I ever want to get rid of a body, I know where to do it now. But anyway, oh, let's see. Oh, and I had a pet pig. Any of y'all ever had a pet pig? All kitties had a pet pig. Oh, okay. My pig was called Lucy. And one cold November day, Uncle Olis came with his pickup truck and had sides on the pickup truck. You don't see that much anymore. Had wooden sides on there. And they loaded Lucy in that pickup truck, and we went over to his house. And I didn't know, what was going on. There was this great big pot down there, and there was a fire going on underneath it, and there was a windlass where you could pull something up. And Lord have mercy, Papa Woods shot Lucy right in the eye. And for years after that, I wouldn't eat bacon or any kind of meat. I was a vegetarian because I'd say, look at that piece of bacon. Mother'd say, eat your bacon, eat your sausage. I'd say, Papa Woods shot Lucy right in the eye. I did walk over where the cracklings were being made and ate a few cracklings. I didn't know it was from Lucy, or I wouldn't have eaten it. But they put her down in that boiling water, and they scraped her down and did all the processing there. Then they took part of Lucy over to my grandmother Boman's salt box. Now, if y'all ever seen a salt box, it looks like a coffin. It's got salt in it. I'm talking about lots of salt. And they put part of Lucy down there, and then they covered her in salt, the part that I saw anyway. And every once in a while, Grandmother Boman would go out there and cut something off of that piece of meat and use that meat for breakfast or for flavoring up the greens or whatever she had to eat. Let's see. I'm taking too long. We hear the phrase a lot, run around like a chicken with its head cut off. I know what that's like. I saw Papa Woods. I saw him when he said, you hold the front right here and I'll hold her right here with the other hand, and then he went like that and the head fell off and he turned that thing loose and blood went everywhere and that chicken went all over their yard. One time it was time for Sunday dinner and Aunt Dot said, y'all gonna have to go out there and get me a chicken to fry. Well, I couldn't catch the chicken. So Papa Woods, he just said, well, I'll take care of this blankety blank chicken. And he went in the house, got his 12 gauge single shot shotgun that kicked like a mule, and came out there and blew the chicken's head off. And it ran around the yard, blood going everywhere. I pity children today that haven't seen such things as that. Well, I could go on and talk about a lot of things. I'll talk about maybe just one or two more, okay? Is it okay if I talk about one or two more of my family? Uncle Joseph, we called him Uncle Josie, was my great uncle. And I went to his house one time with Uncle Olus Woods, who was my mother's brother, and we went over there to see Uncle Josie, and we were sitting at the table there, and he had a habit of having chickens in his house. And we were sitting there, and Olus and Uncle Josie were drinking coffee. Olus put his cup down, and I was just doing what little boys do. I was curious, looking around. All of a sudden, an egg fell right into Olus's cup and splattered. And I looked up, and there was a chicken on one of the rafters up there had laid an egg, and he'd gone right in that cup. Uncle Josie, though, he was, believe it or not, he was an educated man. He, at one time, was going to be a lawyer. He would sometimes on Sunday afternoons have young teenagers to come over and sit on the porch, and he would quote poetry to them and read them poetry, like Shakespeare's poetry, Robiette of Omar Khayyam, and just all kinds of things. You know, how do I love thee? Let me count the ways, and all that. But he had a broken heart, and I'm going to tell you why I know that. And if he went to heaven, I'm going to see him there, and I'm going to ask him. He fell in love with a lady, and somehow she decided he wasn't going to be good enough for her, so she ran off with somebody out to the Midwest, probably Missouri, if I remember correctly. And he never married, to my knowledge. Honestly, he never married, did he? When I first moved back to Vernon, my oldest daughter then, she was just a child, Amy and I went out to Uncle Josie's old shack just to see what was still in there. And over in the corner of one of the rooms there was an old quilt. Oh, it was gross. It was awful, dirty, filthy. Birds had been in there on it. And I pulled that thing back, and underneath there was a booklet. And it was the roll book from Emmaus School. I still have that roll book from the late 1800s. And not only that, but there was a whole stack of cards, Christmas cards in there. And those Christmas cards, every one of them was signed by a woman, different years, year after year after year. And every one of them was signed with her name at the bottom, right under where she wrote, love. And every one of those Christmas cards had come from a town out in the Midwest. I think it was the woman that left him. Just saying. I got to hush now. I wanted to know why Papa Woods was laid out at Olus's house, why Papa Woods had those coins on his eyes. And Mama said, well, that's just to keep his eyes from opening. And I didn't sleep much in the bedroom next to that all night long because I, used to carry people to the house for the viewing and all, and for the wake. All the men would sit up, chew tobacco, and spit in the wood-burning stove. But anyway, I was in there, and I couldn't sleep all night long, partly because all the sheets that Aunt Dot had were made out of flour sacks, sewn together. And she did do this, though. She turned the hem side down so I'd have the smooth side to sleep on. And I remember that so much. I also remember picking up that cigar and somebody threw out and smoking it and throwing up off the porch. But anyway, I have too many memories. I've got to say something. I got to tell you this story that it's, and I'll have to use a dirty word, okay? I'll have to use a curse word, or it won't come out right, and y'all just have to forgive me. The Lord forgives me. But you've probably heard stories about Joe and Lum Hicks. Now, Mr. Jim Hicks was the deputy sheriff when we first moved back to Vernon in 1972. But his dad was Joe Hicks, and Lum was Joe's brother. Back in the Depression days, they had to go to Columbus by wagon, and they went over there and spent the night in the wagon. And on the way back, out near where Drexel Hayes used to live. It was coming up a big storm, and lightning was just popping all around them. And Joe said, Lum, we better go over here and park under this tree and get under the wagon. And lightning hit there near the tree and all around them. It was just flashing everywhere. And Joe said, well, I'm not much of a prayer. Lum, you say us a prayer. And so they bowed their heads, and Lum said, oh, Lord, this here's your humble servants, Joe and Lum Hicks. And Joe said, just stop right there. You've done played hell. You told him who he was. But anyway, y'all have some stories you'd like to tell. We have time, I'm sure.